enforceable. Okay, well, they've missed all that. It's okay. Well, that's all right. Yeah, will be good for next year because most people would already have their accommodations booked and reservations made this year at their prices. So to throw like a 3% thing on top of that at this point would be kind of unfair. So this will give them a warrant. Like once we pass it, they'll give them basically 12 months to set up their, booking.com stuff to have the prices included in that. And that's what they had asked of the regional one when they were doing it. And the regional, like Bridgewater's doing it that way. They're coming out with it now and enforcing it for next year. And I think Chester's doing the same just to give their right. So we'll just forward this to the next meeting. So besides that, I have no additions or deletions. There's no closed session. So yeah. So if anyone else doesn't have anything, we can move to approval of agenda with that removal. If you guys are okay with that. Okay, so recommendation that committee of the whole approve the agenda for February 12th with the changes made. Is there a mover? Moved by Councilor Babineau. Is there a seconder? Second by Councilor Fulton. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Approval of the minutes. Recommendation that committee of the whole approve the minutes from January 7th, 2025 meeting is presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councilor Strong. Is there a seconder? Councilor Fulton. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. There are no presentations. Yes. There's no real business arising or unfinished business. And so we're right on to new business. So the first thing under new business is the expense and hospitality policy. So Kayla, if you want to go over that, that would be great.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So tonight we're in a committee of the whole session. So the intent of showing you folks these proposed policies is so you guys have an idea of the first draft, and then hopefully we can go through and council can suggest any edits, questions, amendments before bringing this back for a potential notice and then decision at the regular council meetings. So to get started, I'll walk you through the proposed updates to our expense and hospitality policy and explain how we believe it improves on the current version. So for a bit of background, per the Municipal Government Act, every municipality must review and either update or readopt its expense and hospitality policy following a municipal election. So during our review, as we prepared to bring this forward for council, we identified areas where the current policy could be clearer or stronger. So these areas are outlined in a table in the staff report, but just to give you a high level, I can go through a bullet point list of we're trying to introduce clearer approval structures across the organization, not just for management and council. So we're encompassing all staff in this. More clarity and flexibility around mileage and travel booking. Clearer guidelines on when alcohol can be purchased or permitted under hospitality expenses. A structured framework for professional development requests. Clearer process for hospitality claims. So with that, you have the policy, the draft proposed policy in there, and you have our current policy also in the agenda package. So if council has any questions, additions, deletions, suggestions, I would love to hear them.
Okay, who wants to start if they have any questions or concerns, comments? Deputy Mayor?
I was just looking at the meal per diem allowances. And so I'm looking at the chart itself. That was a nice, convenient way to go through the different elements. I think it was identified that the previous ones were pretty small and didn't really cover expenses at a reasonable rate. I'm just wondering why those particular numbers were selected, and if we know if there's consistency with other municipal units on that kind of thing.
Yeah, so through the chair, we did do a jurisdictional scan looking at what our neighbors in primarily the South Shore municipalities and further, I believe I looked at East Hants, West Hants. And our numbers were already in alignment with what other municipalities were in the current. So recognizing that a lot of things have changed and gotten more expensive in the last 4 years since the last time this policy was reviewed, we consulted with finance to propose a modest increase of, I believe it's $3 across the board there. So a $3 increase. So still putting us in par with the median expense reimbursements across other municipalities. So we did see some municipalities had our current rates, and then some municipalities were closer aligned to this. Again, if council felt that this was something to revisit, this is the opportunity to talk about, but speaking with finance, they believe this was also an easy change to work into, a modest increase to reflect how expensive everything has gotten.
This does fall in line. I can't speak for anything else, but like here and war amps, I've traveled quite a bit many moons ago with my daughter through the CHAMP program, and many moons ago, because my daughter's 26 now, I haven't went with her in 10, 11 years. They were giving you $75 a day then for meals per person, right? And you didn't have to have receipts because receipts became too big of a paperwork nightmare. I mean, I've went away for the town a couple of times for 4 or 5 days and thought I had my receipts and didn't, so I just didn't bother to put a claim in, right? Because I couldn't, so I think this is the way to do it. Whether the numbers are right or not is up for debate. I mean, coming into this before I even read this, I was thinking like $75 a day was a fair number at that point, and that's basically what they're suggesting. It's 79, I think, or 78, but the $12 incidental, is something I haven't seen before in other programs. But again, that's certainly up to debate. But I don't think anyone's going to make money off this recommendation, right? So, you can't get breakfast at McDonald's anymore for the amount that we were allowed to claim. So.
Just also on that same block, there's the amount quoted for private lodging. And it says 35 there, but it says 7. Okay.
Well, my apologies. The staff report with the table, that's an incorrect number. There is a typo there where I have a 35 per day for private accommodation. The policy reflects the accurate, which is a 75. So 35 is incorrect typo in the staff report.
That's if you stay with relative.
Yeah, the intent of
Friend.
a friend or relative in lieu of staying at a hotel. And then we also put a cap for mileage. So if you are choosing to stay with a friend or a relative, and say they live 30 minutes out from your conference, there is a cap there. So you're not claiming mileage for there. The $75 constitutes your mileage to and from, because recognizing while the hotel room at a conference might be a bit cheaper, if you're claiming mileage every single day to go there for a 3-day event, it might just all add up to be the same. So there's that cap there for that reason as well.
Councilor Daphne?
Can you explain the alcohol claims? I'm pretty sure I understand, but maybe for those out above us, please.
Yeah, of course. So within the Municipal Government Act, municipalities are allowed to include the purchase of alcohol through its hospitality policies. So currently we do have that in our policy. However, the parameters aren't clearly defined. I think in our current policy, we just quote the section of the Municipal Government Act saying we can. So we have in this policy specific time. So if we're hosting dignitaries or it's a part of a special event, there are a few hospitality instances where maybe alcohol does make sense to have there. But we've made it extra clear in this proposed policy that any alcohol expense has to be vetted and pre-approved. And if you did not, or the way the policy has been set out, anyone who doesn't get that pre-approval, it can't be something that you expense later. It has to be very clear that we are aligned with this policy within hospitality expenses. So the policy sets those parameters just for extra clarity of the few instances where alcohol can be purchased.
And for public's awareness, that's for functions, group events. We at no time can claim alcohol on an expense claim when we're away on a training course. So someone read into that's no, quite frankly, when I'm away with the town, I have to ask for 2 receipts at most meals, right? So that's just the way you do it. Because we used to have a receipt, so one receipt you could claim, but you weren't allowed to have alcohol on the one you claimed. And that's to continue, because that's not the intent of being reimbursed for a meal when you're representing the town. Anything else anyone has to? I must say, I really like to get the gift thing on there too. So now we have some guidelines, because before it was just whatever somebody thought was a good idea, call down around town and buy a dignitary something and away you go. At least there's some guidelines there now. So I really like that. It's a little more stringent. Councillor Fullerton?
I just want to, not a question, more of a comment that it seems to make overall, it seems to be pretty sensible and it seems to be very well laid out. There's very little room for confusion in my mind. You know, some of the things that were not present in the previous policy or in earlier versions of this policy. I think it's, and even the approval for the hospitality expenses and so on that are described quite clearly. You know, I think this is a good step ahead. It should answer a lot of questions for members of the public that are concerned about money being spent. Thank you.
Councillor Babineau?
Also, just a general comment and very much echoing what Councillor Fullerton just said. I think this is great. I think this adds some much needed clarity on an, I don't want to say outdated policy, because obviously it would have been updated 4 years ago, but you know, in a modest bump reflecting inflation and just seeming like it's going to make things easier on the staffing end as well with dealing with expense claims. So happy to see that.
Thank you. The other thing I just mentioned quickly is the reason this has to be approved, and we're going through this as well, is that unlike bigger municipal units, unbeknown to the general public, we're not a big unit. We're pretty small, and none of us here have like town access to town credit cards or anything of that nature. So when we go away, usually the rooms are paid for up front through the town hall, and then our meals we pay for ourselves and get reimbursed when we get back. But you know, I've been sitting in this chair for 18 months and have never seen a town credit card. So I'm sure we have them. I know we have them to do certain functions here within the town hall and like training events and that. We might get pizza delivered or sandwiches delivered, put it on, but we don't have any access. So this is a way to know what we're you know, because it shouldn't be a deterrent for people to represent the town. It shouldn't cost people money to represent the town at a training event or conference, quite frankly. Deputy Mayor?
Just one other question. I'm looking at Councillor Babineau thinking of this. When we talk about kilometerage, what about electric cars? No, is there provision for that?
Through the
Something?
chair, this is something we've been discussing. So I did reach out to our counterparts in Bridgewater, as they seem to be leading the way with, they have police vehicles that are electric. Still very much up in the air of what this looks like. So as you can see in our policy, we've based our mileage or kilometerage based off the provincial's rates and how they do. So right now there isn't the precedent set yet, and I know it's something that is being talked about. If council did want us to look into that to see, again, I did reach out to the folks who I thought might be the leaders in having this in the policy. It's still very much an unknown of what that would look like. That doesn't mean we can't be the leaders in trying to figure that out. So if that were the direction from council, we could explore that a little bit more and maybe look at other provinces. Perhaps I'm confident there is a municipality somewhere that has this.
I'm all for making us, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I say I'm all for making us the, you know, the trendsetters. So if you want to look into that, just, you know, I wouldn't hold the policy approval up for that, but just something that could be added at a future time, potentially. Thanks.
Councillor Strong?
I'm just wondering why shared travel encouraged isn't carried over into the updated policy. Thinking of the environment.
Yeah, apologies. I'll take a look for it. My understanding is it might just be hidden somewhere. So number 8 of the policy, council members and staff must travel by the most direct routes and use the most economical means of transportation whenever possible. I thought I had put something in there about shared. So if I had deleted that in my last round of edits, perhaps we could make it extra clear that we prefer the shared when possible.
And this group has been very diligent on texting or emailing each other. And if our schedules work out, unfortunately, some of us work different times or different things or have different functions we have to attend. But we have been traveling together at quite a few functions just to let the public know that we're not taking 7 cars to most events. Councilor Babineau.
And I'll just chime in and say, for anyone who might be listening, or just to have put it on record, I've never claimed mileage for my EV and I doubt that I ever will. But if we wanted to explore that, I'm, happy for us to do that as well, but.
Any other comments? So there is a recommendation here to move this obviously to the council meeting on the 25th, I guess. So if someone's prepared to make that recommendation, now would be the time. Councilor Strong, is there a seconder? Councilor Fullerton, any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carry unanimous. Next one, 8.3, public input policy. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So moving on to this next item, just like the last one, we have a draft policy in your agenda package for your discussion and consideration. So I'll go over a little bit of background. So our current public presentation policy mainly regulates how individuals and groups present to council. It focuses on scheduled presentation, but doesn't comprehensively address broader public engagement methods such as correspondence, petition, and our regular public input session. So what we've tried to do is build on what we currently do that isn't necessarily captured in a policy. So there isn't really anything new in here. It's what we've been doing that likely should have lived in our current policy. So some of those key updates include the standing public input session, which, as I just said, is already a part of our regular agendas, but the rules around it have never been formalized in a policy. So this change, by having it in the policy, just ensures that consistency and clarity in how the public input is managed at council meetings. This proposed policy aims to have clearer presentation guidelines, so defines what types of presentations are appropriate for council meetings. To try to save some time, as we saw last night was a bit of a long meeting, so limiting maybe 2 presentations per meeting and ensure that the presentations, to make them beneficial to council's time and the public, that they focus on community initiatives, updates, or topics of broad public interest, that they are not here for promotional contexts or issues outside of the town's jurisdiction. The new proposed policy aims to also give a more structured correspondence and petition process, so clarify submission requirements for letters, petitions, ensuring that council and staff can consistently review these. So these were just some of the highlights. You have the draft policy, you have the current policy in your agenda package. So as we're here in committee of the whole, just like we just did, if anyone has any edits, suggestions, or questions, I'd be happy to answer them and implement your edits.
Any comments from anyone? Councilor Fullerton.
I noticed that this has nothing in it at all about protocols for public hearings. So that's a separate item altogether, correct?
So there is some a section in here about public hearings and how we deal with them. However, if we're talking about public participation meetings, that would fall under, we have a separate policy that deals with the planning. However, there are some guidelines within this policy for public hearings. Sorry, I should have this here. So just the submission and the participation, which is in section 9. But if we're talking about those more land use related ones and planning matters, they do have their own separate policy.
Anybody else? Councilor Strong.
Sure. I'm just curious how we're going to differentiate between correspondence for action and information shared. I think recently it came to my attention that there might have been facts that might not have been, like I'm a fact checker, right? And are we going to take responsibility for rebroadcasting something that is not is unfactual, or is it going to be borne by the person putting in the public record?
Through the chair. So 2 parts in terms of correspondence for action. The way that we've written it or tried to align out is that Staff will prepare a recommendation like we've currently been doing if the correspondence aligns with a policy, bylaw, or existing procedure. So typically you would see if we got a request for a flag raising, that aligns with a policy that's already been approved by council. Therefore, if it aligns with that policy, staff would put forward the recommendation that we recommend council approve this flag raising. Same with noise exemption bylaw requests is where you'll see those correspondence for action being we have a bylaw that permits noise exemptions and staff have reviewed and we think it aligns with the bylaw and what's can be considered under exemption. Therefore, we put it forward to council. In terms of misinformation, I would say this is something, the language and how we want to use it we've tried to create something here in section 10 addressing misinformation. And the intent there is we don't want to perpetuate perhaps misinformation or incorrect statements by publishing them through the council agenda. So by adding some of this language in section 10, it does give some kind of parameters where we can work with the author and clarify the intent. But the intent there, as it notes in the final part of that clause, is we don't want to restrict opinions, perspectives, or interpretations, provided they are identified as such. The intent there is we want to have some kind of mechanisms in place to prevent incorrect information from being continuously perpetuated in a public agenda.
So we're not censoring.
No, the intent there is we work with the author. So I guess an example to say, oh, I realize the town, again, this is purely just an example. I realize the town passed a bylaw on X and this will lead to this. That gives us a little bit of mechanism to say, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. However, council hasn't passed a bylaw related to this. And then we would work with them a little bit. Now that you understand, or we've been able to clarify this, do you want to rework your submission? So again, the intent, they might not be happy with a proposed bylaw or something that's coming down. They can still share their opinion and we hope they do. The intent there is to say, no, the bylaw wasn't passed, or this isn't a bylaw that council has considered. So working with them to ensure education.
Anybody else? I'd just like to say that what I've seen here in the last little while, especially really recently, last night was a prime example. We had 2 public hearings. We had a lot of people speak on different subjects, either during the public part or the presentation. And I just think that public presentations really aren't that big of a deal and aren't that big of an issue when both sides treat them with respect. And if we treat our citizens with respect, they tend to treat us back with respect. And the good sign was last night. I think everybody was respectful. They were all over the map on things, but they were respectful. And you can have difference of opinions in a community. You just have to learn to live together. And, not everybody has to be on the same page. I'll put it that way. So there is a recommendation in front of us. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Okay. Go.
Through the chair, with respect to petitions, and I'm not sure if it's a question or just a clarity in understanding as to what is the impact of a petition on council deliberations. Is it considered just like a public submission would be for all of our consideration? Is there any kind of gravity attached to it, or is there some sort of precedent from other municipalities or other levels of government with respect to that?
So through the chair. So provincially mandated through the Municipal Government Act and any other provincial legislation, a petition doesn't have any teeth in terms of how we have to act. So petitions are really useful tools for a community or groups to use to show their support or their opposition to something in the community. So without any legislative requirements for us to act on a petition, we've put it in here. Our current policy or presentations don't address petitions at all. So we put in some parameters to say, we acknowledge it, we accept it, and we will present it to council. And to protect, again, as you see, petitions often have people's full names and their full addresses, and we have that on record, but we would essentially give a like more redacted version presented to council under correspondence. So it'd be council received a petition from X group. It had 500 signatures on it. It opposes this. So public would, council would get the petition with the full information, and then we would present that publicly on a council agenda. So it still shows the support or the recognition of whatever issue is being brought up. But legislatively, they don't hold any weight, I suppose.
Councillor Daphne?
In regards to number 12, accommodations, it's more of just a statement. We know it's not very accessible here. Just wondering if we could look into maybe a wireless mic or something like that for those who can't make it over to the podium.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Daphne. I had actually made a note on that somewhere and overlooked it, but I'm just thinking I'm sure this will be raised when we look at our accessibility policy and that sort of thing. But in the meantime, I think Councillor Fullerton and Councillor Greek could mention that, maybe just even configuring the tables for staff or something a little bit differently would accommodate people with a wheelchair, or it's really even able-bodied people get tripped up by our tiers. So I really think we need to have a hard look at this and figure out, even in the short term, some makeshift accommodations for people, because it really is troublesome that it's not accessible.
I think accessible, and if we're talking about the policy that we're talking about, I think that we should have staff. Trevor seems to be our audio video guy, but we should have staff bring in some people that do this, look at the bill, look at the room. And if we're obviously staying here, that's why nothing was looked at the last number of years, because the fear was we were going to be gone, I guess. So and now that we're staying here, we should look at the room, look at ways we can make it more accessible, make it better to sit home and actually watch the audio and the video a bit better. I mean, that one little camera up front really probably doesn't cut it. We could probably have both. And all those audio and video things have definitely came down in price over the years, same as anything. I mean, quite frankly, the TVs, if you're going to have monitors for people to see in the stands, we could probably have a bigger monitor somewhere. So if you're sitting in that corner, you probably can't see what's on that TV. Right. So, I mean, just a different setup. So I guess my suggestion would be at budget, before the budget gets presented, have staff bring in some people that do this for a living and come up with a price on audio, video, and as well have our staff look at ways we can make it more accessible, so we can make everything more open and available to everybody, all inclusive to, everybody. Because if you don't have great vision, you can't see these screens. If you don't have great hearing, depending on how things go at night, you can't hear anything. So we're not really the most conducive place to come listen. I find it hard to believe we have as many viewers as we do on YouTube, because all they're looking at is us. Like, they don't see anything else. They don't even see the presenter sometimes if the camera's moved a certain way, or if someone's sitting in the wrong place. So again, I think all that for budget time would be very beneficial. I'm not saying we're doing it, but it'd be nice to know what it would cost to make it more user-friendly.
And on that note,
Good.
I was in court recently, and one of the lawyers had a hearing impairment, and the court actually went into the back room and brought out this little object that sent the messages, just sort of rebroadcasted to her. So there are things out there, and I think the court system has really done a big job of making things accessible. They might want to be talked to, especially if there is an accessibility grant lurking in the future.
Councillor Fullerton.
There very much is an accessibility grant somewhere. No, and I mean, small steps, and, without breaking the bank, what Councillor Greek and I did last week was we pulled these tables this way. to make more room at the end so that if someone did come in a chair, that there was a spot for them right there. And in fact, they could use the microphone at the end of the table for the period of time they were presenting. And just, just that sort of, if it's all in our minds that that's how we're going to do it. If somebody comes in a chair and wants to be part of the meeting, then that's a good first step. And then I think what that'll do is that'll identify other opportunities.
Deputy Mayor?
Just so we don't lose this thread, because I know we're not making decisions tonight. I'd look to Kayla for advice as to how we move this ahead. Would this be through our regional accessibility coordinator person, or with whom do we speak to get sort of advice on this? Or
Yeah,
would that
so
work?
we are fortunate that we have a great regional accessibility coordinator who I know would be more than happy to come and help us in the interim with not budgetary items, but in terms of what can we do right now with what we have. So if council or committee of the whole, as council felt, because it's just a direction to staff to explore some things, we could make that here because it's not a binding. You're recommending that we look into things further to budget considerations. If that was something the committee of the whole wanted staff to investigate as budget deliberations come down the road, at least there could be some kind of direction given via motion here tonight if you wanted to, or at our next meeting, if someone wanted to present a notice of motion or something like that, we could put it on the next regular agenda. So if we wanted to take a seat on that to talk about what that could look like for budget discussions, absolutely. In terms of making a motion for us to get in touch with our accessibility coordinator, I don't think a motion would be necessary. I feel like this is something we as staff could move forward with. We hear you, we feel the general consensus, and we have a person here who wants to help us that works for our region.
Excellent. So we'll leave that with Staff Counselor Fullerton.
Just wanted to add that the LCAAC meets monthly, and I had a conversation with Ellen at the last meeting about some of the small steps that we could take, short of coming up with a full-blown plan for accessibility. And, these were some of the things that we talked about. So, I mean, that would even be an item that, we could submit to the committee for its next meeting, which is in March, early in March.
No, it's great. I think we're all on the same page with accessibility. We all want to be open and transparent and available to our residents. So we want to make this building as user friendly and user available as possible, because right now, if you are in a wheelchair, it's hard to come in here and participate. And again, we have audio and visual. I mean, the other day when that one camera didn't work, we had no audio for the whole night. There should be some type of multiple camera system that it might not be the perfect view, but at least it would be some kind of video, right? So, and again, it wasn't looked into previously because they were worried about the future of the building. But as we've heard, we're probably not moving anywhere during my lifetime. So I think that we should look at trying to make this room as friendly, user-friendly and as possible. So I guess we're all on the same page. I'm sure staff has heard us. So if we're ready, we can move on to the motion in front of us. Is someone prepared to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Strong. Do you want to read it out? Just so you're supposed to read it into the minutes.
Sorry, that the committee of the whole refer the draft public input policy to council for notice.
It's removed. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Babineau. Any further discussion or question? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. There's no notice of motions. There's no closed session. So meeting's adjourned. We don't really need a motion. So meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the citizens who are coming out tonight. Great to see people are interested. Yeah. Big letdown from last night's total numbers.